is Bill Hollbrook, who we all remember so well. We're going to hear some stories about him later. But here to present for her grandfather is Jenny Hollbrook.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
My name is Jenny, and as Tom said, I'm Bill's granddaughter. I was very fortunate to have him as my grandfather, and I'm so excited to be here with all of you tonight and to share a little bit more about him. So we're going to start at the beginning. Bill was born in 1924 in Fairbury, Nebraska. He had 3 older sisters and 1 younger brother, and his mother was a school teacher. His father worked for the American Express Company, but he was laid off at the start of the Great Depression. So to contribute to the family during the Depression, Bill actually made soap in the basement, and he ran a paper route in order to make ends meet. After the Great Depression, his father worked for the Treasury Department and then the Veterans Administration. When Bill was 12, the family moved to Lincoln, Nebraska, so that all 5 kids would be closer to the University of Nebraska. And this is what would set Bill on the path that would ultimately lead him to entering the world of colleagues. And that started when he met his future wife, Ginge, who I'm sure many of you in the room probably also remember. It's not possible to tell Bill's story without talking about Ginge, and he met her when they were both performing in their high school play as juniors in Lincoln. As Ginge always put it, he was playing the handsome young male leading part, she playing the part of a mad lunatic escaped from the asylum. And as she always told us, naturally he fell in love with me. Ginge's love for collies was nurtured from a young age by reading Tribune's Loud Dog like so many, and her time spent with her grandfather's working collies on his Nebraska farm. So Ginge's first collie of her own, the Count of Buffington, Buff, shown here, arrived to Nebraska via train in the spring of 1939. And according to Bill, he knew he had made the conquest with Ginge when he finally succeeded in kissing her goodnight without Buff standing in between them. Buff became the first collie that Bill would become acquainted with. Bill and Ginge then dated off and on for the next 7 years between the war, university, and her time spent in California working as a reporter, as well as her time in New York, where she temporarily worked as a nightclub photographer. Next slide, please. Bill joined the Navy on January 1st, 1944, and he had hoped to become a pilot, but while he was in the Navy, he was a boxer, and he unfortunately sustained a permanent eye injury in a match, which then made him ineligible to be a pilot, so he was trained to be a navigator instead. He was always really proud of his service in the Navy, and is something that he reflected upon often in his life. Bill was also recognized early on for his diplomatic skills. He was president of a student leaders organization who were modeling themselves after the United Nations, seeking to create an international student union with the purpose of joining the efforts in peacemaking internationally. As president of this organization, he was actually invited to go to Switzerland for postgraduate work, but instead, he chose to stay in the United States. Next slide. And he married Ginge in 1947. Once she finally said yes, after he asked her several times. The day after they were married, they headed off to the University of Alabama, where Ginge had been accepted into a graduate program for creative writing, and Bill simultaneously finished his degree in political science. Bill and Ginge's first collie they co-owned together was Pleasant Hill Devon Rhapsody, who they acquired from Billy Aschenbrenner. And at this time, they also began to develop what would be a lifetime friendship with Steve Field of Parader Collies. Jidge originally met Steve at the Cornhusker Kennel Club in 1940, when she went best of breed with Buff, and Steve went best opposite with Lodestone Bandolier II. Next slide, please. Steve then used Buff to sire his first litter of collie pups out of Lady later in 1940, and Lady would also later become the dam of champion Silver Hoe Parader. The breeding between Buff and Lady produced 10 puppies, and Jidge kept 2 of them. And this picture shows Jidge's father flanked on each side by the puppies, and then in the middle is Buff. And this is in 1941, right before the U.S. entered World War II. Jidge always told the story that on the drive home from picking out the puppies, her father predicted that Steve would become a great breeder because of his interest in genetics and his recently completed master's degree in biology. Her father was quickly impressed with Steve in the short time spent with him looking at puppies that day. And then Bill entered the world of AKC by volunteering to be the show chairman of the Cornhusker Kennel Club in 1948. Then, in 1954, after they started a family, they made the momentous decision to move to Southern California, where Bill had accepted a job as the college bookstore manager at Long Beach State University. At this point, Jidge had been corresponding with Ted Cattell of Borco Collies. Prior to their move to California, he had reached out to her when she was writing a monthly column for Dog News. And when they arrived in California, they continued their friendship, and the Borco Collies became a part of their foundation lines. Within days of them arriving in California, there was a knock at the door. And it was Ted, who said, "I have somebody I want you to meet." As Jidge always recalled, she had not even had time to finish unpacking, but she packed the kids into the car, and off they went to meet Rudd Weatherwax. As Nancy recalls, when they walked into the house, Pal, the collie who was in the MGM Lassie movie, was laying on one side of the couch, and then he invited Junior, shown here, and he was at the time being trained to play Lassie on the inaugural Lassie TV series. Once they were settled in California, Bill and Jidge began to build their small breeding program. Ted, Rudd, and Jidge had several long conversations where they told her their thoughts on the state of training dogs at the time and how many terrible, harsh methods were used, and that they really wouldn't recommend any of the trainers in the area. They were all way too harsh. He explained that all the movie dogs at the time were being trained using positive, reward-based incentive training. Rudd encouraged Jidge to start her own training classes, and later, every dog that came to Bill to be shown was started with her. Jidge was a beautiful and talented handler herself. She is shown here handling Kawani's little Bo Peep, grandmother of champion Shane McDuff of Kawani at the Santa Barbara Kennel Club in 1964. So the focus of Jidge's training was very much on prioritizing keeping the dogs relaxed, happy, and engaged without having to be forced into the ring. In 1956, another formative dog would come into the Hollbrooks' lives. That year, the CCFA was held in Southern California with Judge Alex Gibbs, and Steve Field flew out to stay with Bill and Jidge. He brought Bold Venture and Parader's Jet Pilot. Steve would go on to go best of breed with Bold Venture and win the Futurity with Jet Pilot. Steve stayed with Jidge and Bill, and they took him up to meet Ted at Vasquez Rocks, where Steve always remembered fondly the trip up and then the walk down the canyon with the Borco Collies streaming down ahead of them. So Bold Venture would then become the sire of Bill and Jidge's first collie in California, shown here, Lady Dubrook of Buffington. Lady would eventually be bred to Borco's Roger Bright, shown here with Ted Cattell. And that litter of 10 puppies would produce Bill and Jidge's most prolific dog, Champion Blazer of Buffington, who Nancy picked out when he was 5 hours old, based solely on the fact that he was the only puppy with a blaze in the litter. Next slide. Blazer first entered the show ring with 9-year-old Nancy at the 1961 CCFA in Anaheim, California, where they won the Open Novice Dog class under Judge Bob Wells. Blazer would go on to earn his first points at his second show under Judge Helene Carpenter of Llewellyn Collie fame, where he went best of breed over 5 specials. He then finished 3 months later. His most memorable win was going best of breed at the Southern California Collie Club Specialty Show under Judge W.R. Van Dyke of Honeybrook Hills. And he's pictured here also with Ted and Lewis Carpenter of Llewellyn Collies. At the time, Blazer was only the second collie champion to have achieved a CDX, the first being Mrs. William Long's champion master Lucio Miranda, who achieved the title in 1948. But along with being a winner in the show and obedience ring, Blazer was also a keen working dog, and Jig was really one of the early promoters of utilizing the versatility of the collie and recognizing it as a valuable part of the sport. So here he is, working ducks in their backyard in California. At the time, there were no herding titles or herding classes at shows, so they were stuck in the backyard. It was actually Blazer's son, champion Sir Ree Bob of Buffington, Bobby, who would become Bill and Jidge's first champion, technically. He became a champion before his sire due to Blazer having contracted distemper as a puppy, which resulted in him not putting on enough coat and weight to go into the ring until he was 5 years old. Bobby went on to become one of the first collies to be exported to a Japanese collie fancier in 1961. Bill and Jidge had a small kennel and went on to breed several influential dogs throughout the 60s and 70s, including champion Buffington's Gambler Owolita, shown here, and champion Buffington's Lady Nutmeg. In 1967, Hollbrook's Kewanee Caper was bred to champion Pareda's Reflection, producing Helga Kane's breathtaking champion Canebriar Hollbrook Halou, dam of champion Canebriar Keynote, an outstanding winner of his era as well. This photo shows Nancy holding Hallie at her first show, where she won the sweepstakes at the Southern California Collie Club under Judge Mildred Horton. So picture left, right, you can see is Hallie, unidentified, but my mom thinks that it's Rick Haven's Buccaneer, so if anybody in the room knows, come by me later and we can solve this mystery. Champion Maylor Silver Spark and champion Antrim all the way to second. Helga always said that Hallie was her most favorite. So the Hollbrook's dogs were foundational to both the Shoreham and Canebriar collies. So Bill obtained his professional handler's license from the AKC in 1964, and at that point he branched out from handling collies, as you can see, and handled several different breeds, including Samoyeds. He first apprenticed under handler Wayne Baxter, who was at the time showing champion Elfdale Viking, a top-winning Shetland sheepdog of the time. Bill had the opportunity to step in and handle Viking at a few shows, and Bill joined the top handlers at the time in Southern California, including Frank Sabella, Walt Schellenbarger, and Corky Broom. So during his handling career, he handled many breeds, including pugs. I just thought this was pretty cute. And he also handled their homebred dogs in the Southern California Collie Circuit, including champion Long Ridge Dark Moment, shown here, who was a grandson of Blazer, and he's shown here under Judge Walter Lee of Juanita Collies. And Nancy even let him take Blazer in the ring for a spin sometimes. And here he is shown here judging under Judge Hayworth Hoke. Bill from the start as a professional handler was known for his humor and camaraderie in and out of the ring with his fellow handlers. We really love this quote from Janine Walker-Keed of Incandescent Collies. She recalls, "I met Bill Hollbrook for the first time in the late 60s during my teen years. He was handling and won with a rough-coated sable and white collie puppy bitch at the Silver Bay Kennel Club. I prefer to watch and study some of the best handlers on the West Coast, such as Frank Sabella, Lena Basquette, Terry McCullough Parker, Rob Stura, Patricia Craig, Tony Gwinner, Fawn Johnson, Barbara Humphreys, and Bill Hollbrook. Bill was very gracious when I stopped him outside the ring after judging to ask him a few questions. I told him I thought his handling was very precise and smooth, and would he please give me some pointers? With a smile, he told me to always show well-trained collies and don't fidget around with the dog in the ring because judges don't like to see fidgety handlers. I will never forget that day. Bill's smile, his good advice, and our laughter. In 1969, Bill became approved as an AKC judge, and here he is judging champion Tamarack Asterisk at the 1978 National that was held in Louisville, Kentucky, with at the time a record-breaking entry of 938 dogs. He awarded Best of Breed of that year to the veteran champion Tartanside the Gladiator, and he awarded Best Opposite to champion Tamaset's Golden Dream, handled by Steve Barger. In the early 70s, Bill was also invited as one of the first U.S. judges to judge a collie specialty in Japan with the Japan Collie Club. In 1980, Bill was invited by the AKC to become a field representative, which is probably what he's best known for. He spent the next 27 years in this role, traveling all over the U.S. to shows where he became a fixture and a familiar face to all, and was known for always working to make a fair and level playing field for the good of everyone. He was known for his mentoring of many judges and handlers over the years, and was always willing to lend an ear and share words of wisdom. He was a goodwill ambassador for the collie breed and became a favorite go-to person to resolve conflicts large and small. He was known for his soft-spoken guidance and opinion, patience, generosity, honesty, and fairness, along with being a good listener who was filled with common sense and had a wonderful sense of humor. Bill and Jidge relocated to Washington State in the early 1970s, where they would spend the remainder of their lives. First living in the Seattle area and eventually moving to Sequim, where they enjoyed the beautiful Pacific Northwest and hiking with their collies. And they celebrated their 55th wedding anniversary at, of course, a dog show. When I was reflecting on doing this presentation, I thought a lot about my time spent with my grandparents, and I have so many fond memories of summers spent in Sequim with them, and of course all their lovely collies. And something that really stuck out to me was remembering growing up listening to him on the phone with various colleagues, judges, handlers, and breeders in the next room when I would visit. His booming laugh and wise words echoed through the house and influenced me from a young age in the power of diplomacy and humor in communication and human relationships. I really saw how influential he was to so many and how he could diffuse tensions with a clever wit and a sly smile. I learned how powerful it can be to ensure that everyone feels heard and that all perspectives are considered, listened to, and validated. The impact of his presence, his genuine love for people and hearing their stories, and my many years listening to him went on to serve me very well in my years spent as a professional with possibly the only group of people who might be more intense than crazier than dog people, horse people. Bill retired from his role as a field rep in 2007, but he couldn't stay away from dog shows for too long, even though Jidge would have preferably stayed home more. And he returned to judging, where he was approved for collies, Shelties, Malamutes, Samoyeds, Siberians, the Toy Group, and as a Best in Show judge. Bill was awarded AKC's inaugural Langdon Scarda Award, and in 2013 he was nominated as a finalist for the AKC Lifetime Achievement Award. Bill finished his judging career by judging dogs at the 2010 CCFA, where he awarded Winner's Dog to Arrow Hill, Swords Held High. He officially retired later in 2010. And also in this picture with Lori Jeffker handling is Bob Futh. And the Fuths couldn't make it tonight, but they were very close friends of Bill and Jidge, and they wanted me to share this. While this induction is meant to be about Bill Hollbrook, we cannot send this note for inclusion in Tom's presentation about him without including his wife, Jidge. She actually led him to the world of collies, as he had to win her over her first collie buff before she'd consider marrying him. Jidge's best known claim to fame is that Steve Field's first litter was sired by Buff, who later produced Champion Silver Hope Raider. After their move from Nebraska to California, the Hollbrooks were active leaders in the developing collie fancy. That is when our paths first crossed, and I fell under Jidge's spell and charm, and enjoyed Bill's wit and wisdom. We always looked forward to seeing him at the Nationals and enjoying his sense of humor, even when he was on official duty as a KC rep, tempered with his own brand of responsibility. The last time we met with the Hollbrooks was finding time to go to swim on a judging assignment in Washington for an all-too-short luncheon after driving to the beautiful Olympic Peninsula. Pictures of that day bring back a great memory. R.I.P. dear friends Bob and Sally. Bill passed away in October of 2019, and he is terribly missed by both myself and my mom. And getting to spend a few days at the dog show and be here tonight, I know how much he would love being here, and he would make the rounds and talk to everyone at every table. So thank you all, and I know he would love being here. I also wanted to have an opportunity. I think there's a few people that maybe wanted to say a few words, so if anyone has a few things that they want to say, let me know.
I'll just say it from here.
Okay.
Bill, yeah, no one's gonna hear you. Oh, do I have to? Oh, you got it, you gotta do it.
It's interesting. Okay, it's interesting. I met Bill, I'm just gonna share this, I wasn't gonna make a speech or anything, but I met Bill and Jidge in the late 70s, 80s, because I had moved to Washington State as well. And we have a lot in common. They came from the Midwest, and my dad's family came from South Dakota. They moved to Seattle from California, and they were the foundation. They created a foundation for Shorthorn Collies, who was my foundation. And what I can say about Bill is that he was just a genuine, wonderful person. And he was a diplomat, but he was mostly a peacemaker with everyone. He made peace wherever he went. He loved the collies. When he was an AKC rep, he would always make a point of being by the collie ring. And he would, even how busy he was as an AKC rep, he was always at the collie ring. And I just really miss his face there, his tall stature and his caring and his wit, of course. But he kept everything really smooth at the shows. And it was really interesting because when he was there when the collies were leaving, the judges did a better job. For some reason. I mean, they were on their toes there. So that's what I can say about him, but I can also say that he was really almost like a father to me, and also a grandparent to my children. Because my family was in California. He was just a great person. Jidge as well. And Nancy. And I did get to see him in his last hours of life. I don't remember doing that, but I was actually at the hospital that evening. So thank you for letting me say something. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Debbie. I had the pleasure of meeting Bill and Jidge in a parking lot at a national. And we invited them into our room because we had a little wine in there. And we had the best time meeting them. Years rolled by, and we continued to be great friends with Bill and Jidge. And as Deborah said, he had the ability to diffuse any kind of situation that could have caused a bench committee hearing. And he had such a way about him of being so gracious. And I told him one time, I said, you know, why don't you run for US president? We wouldn't have any wars anymore. We would be just floating on air and have the best economy. He was such a gentleman, such a good, kind person, and he never took himself too seriously. He could laugh in a heartbeat, and we miss him very much. Oh, and by the way, in later years, Judge became allergic to cows. So they had to have a dog, and they went with a beautiful black standard poodle, and they named her Lassie.
Maybe one or two more people if anyone is really want to say something. Okay. Thank you all again so much for having me here.